Have you ever believed in a love story so perfect that you almost used it to convince yourself that true love still exists? Today, that very love story has cracked in front of millions of people. In a simple press room without glamorous lights or red carpets, Yulong and Yang Mei Mei sat side by side. Not as the radiant dream couple we are used to, but as two tired human beings, eyes red, hands shaking, finally admitting a truth so honest and so painful that it has left an entire fandom in silent shock. Stay with me, because what they revealed is not only about their marriage. It is a mirror reflecting what so many of us silently go through in our own relationships. Welcome to Update X24H. In today's story, we are talking about Yulong and Yang Mei Mei's emotional appearance, where they chose openness instead of perfection, truth instead of a carefully edited fairy tale. Everything we discuss here is based on publicly shared narratives, reports, and emotional storytelling. Our aim is not to attack, to blame, or to judge, but to understand, to reflect, and to find gentle lessons about love, pressure, and healing in the modern world. It was not an explosive scandal or a dramatic argument that stopped the fairy tale. It was a quiet room, simple lighting, and two people who finally looked too tired to pretend. The day Yulong and Yang Mei Mei sat down in that modest press space, something subtle but powerful shifted. For years, they had been framed as living proof that romance could survive fame. Fans looked at them and saw stability, sweetness, and certainty. Yet, on this particular day, the certainty was gone. What replaced it was not hatred but a heavy kind of honesty. The distance between their shoulders, the way their hands rested in their laps before they dared to touch, the silence that stretched too long before the first word was spoken. It all told a story before any confession was made. It was as if the roles they had been playing for the world suddenly no longer fit, and they were left standing there as just themselves. Not characters, not symbols, simply two human beings who had run out of strength to keep the illusion intact. The fairy tale did not explode. It simply paused mid-sentence. Perfect pictures are excellent at hiding almost everything that truly matters. The photographs of Yulong and Yang Mei Mei had always suggested warmth, closeness, and alignment. Every captured glance, every hand resting naturally on an arm or shoulder, seemed to say, "We are fine." Yet, as they began to speak, a very different narrative emerged, one built not on dramatic betrayals, but on all the things that never made it into the frame. They described nights where the lights were off, but the thoughts would not settle. Mornings where they shared a table but not a sentence. Small disagreements were left unresolved because the next schedule awaited. The next script needed reading. The next shoot required a smile. Over time, these minor hurts did not vanish. They layered themselves quietly, like dust on a surface no one remembers to clean. From the outside, the relationship looked polished. Inside, invisible cracks were spreading, threading their way through everyday moments. The tragedy was not that they stopped loving each other. It was that they stopped noticing how far apart they were drifting until the distance became impossible to ignore. What made their confession different from many public breakdowns was the absence of accusation. There was no dramatic pointing of fingers, no attempt to win sympathy by painting the other as the villain. Instead, there was a quiet, almost painful acknowledgement of personal responsibility. When Yulong said he had not been the husband she truly deserved, it was not a slogan crafted by a publicist. It sounded like a line he had repeated silently to himself on too many sleepless nights.
Yang Mei Mei's response was equally striking.
She could have remained in the safer position of the wounded partner, yet she chose not to. By admitting that she had allowed her loneliness to grow in silence, she revealed something that many people find difficult to say. Sometimes our pain deepens because we are afraid to speak it aloud. In that room, both of them stood in front of the world and refused the easy path of blame. They chose instead the more uncomfortable, but more honest route, to admit that two people can love each other and still hurt each other. Not through cruelty, but through neglect, exhaustion, and fear of conflict that stays unspoken for too long. There is a particular kind of fatigue that comes from living as a symbol rather than a person. As Yulong and Yang Mei Mei described their reality, it became clear how often their relationship had been turned into a stage. Dates became content. Private jokes became captions. Moments meant to be intimate slowly morphed into moments meant to be presentable. The world adored the highlight reel, unaware of the cost of keeping it running. Under constant observation, it is easy for genuine affection to slip into rehearsed familiarity. They spoke of scenes on set where their laughter felt rehearsed, their closeness slightly hollow, as if they were trying to recreate a sweetness they once had instead of living it naturally. The cameras captured chemistry, but not the quiet ache that followed when they went home and sat in separate corners of the same room. Love in its pure form is an experience. Yet somewhere along the way theirs had partially shifted into a performance. One with an audience, script and expectations, but with very little space for imperfection, discomfort or raw truth. Eventually, the performance became heavier than their ability to sustain it. Many stories in the public eye end with a simple announcement. A separation, a formal statement and a request for privacy. What made this moment unexpectedly profound was that, after unpacking their pain, Yulong and Mei Mei did not simply walk away from the table, they spoke about staying. Not staying in the old pattern, but staying in a new, more fragile and honest way. They talked about seeking help, not as a shameful last resort, but as a deliberate act of care for something they still valued. Counseling, time off, quieter days without cameras or content, evenings where they forced themselves to talk past the awkwardness. None of it sounded glamorous. It sounded slow, inconvenient and deeply human. The idea of a shared journal, where thoughts could be expressed without interruption, suggested a recognition that sometimes written words are braver than spoken ones. Instead of presenting themselves as a finished, restored couple, they seemed to be saying, "We are in process." It is a rare thing, especially under public scrutiny, to choose the long, uncertain road of healing over the clean certainty of an ending. Yet, that is precisely what they appeared willing to attempt. For fans, this confession was not just news. It was emotional disruption. Many had invested years of admiration into the image of Yulong and Mei Mei as a living fairy tale. Seeing that image soften and crack was painful. There was a sense of grief, not only for the couple, but for the comforting story their relationship had represented. However, alongside the heartbreak, something more complex unfolded. As people listened, many recognized their own struggles reflected back at them. Evenings filled with silence, conversations avoided out of fear, the habit of pretending everything is fine for the sake of appearances. The couple's honesty did not simply shatter illusions. It gave words to feelings that many viewers had never managed to articulate. In that sense, the confession did more than disappoint. It also validated. In comment sections and private messages, people began to share their own stories of distance, miscommunication and the slow fading of closeness. Paradoxically, what began as a painful revelation for two individuals became a quiet source of comfort for countless others, who realized that their private battles did not mean their love was worthless, only that it was human. Strip away the cameras, the headlines and the speculation, and what remains at the heart of this story is a simple, difficult truth. Love is not immune to pressure, and honesty is not always neat. The tears that fell in that room were not just signs of a relationship in trouble. They were signs of a decision to stop protecting an image at the expense of reality. The deeper message is neither cynical nor unrealistically romantic. It suggests that even the most admired couples are not protected from loneliness, from unspoken fears, from the slow erosion that comes when two people stop meeting each other fully. Yet it also suggests that facing these truths, however late, holds more dignity than continuing to perform happiness for everyone else. Their story invites a different understanding of strength. Strength is not never struggling. It is being willing to admit that you are. It is choosing to speak when silence feels safer, to stay in the room when walking away would hurt less in the moment. The real message behind their tears is that love, if it is to survive, must be allowed to be imperfect, questioned, rebuilt and redefined. Not only for the world's sake, but for the quiet well-being of the two hearts at its center. you.